Hi, and welcome to another video by Jim the Car Guy. Today we have a 2010. It's a Mercury Mariner, and we're going to be replacing the driver's side front window regulator assembly with a new one. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to take off all of the screws that you see in the outside portion of the door itself. Then you're going to go inside the armrest portion, and you're going to find the Phillips head screw also inside there. We're going to remove that Phillips head screw, and then once we have them out, being careful not to drop them, we'll put them off to the side. And then down in the very front portion of it, you'll see there's a couple of screws inside the front there as well. Don't force anything until you make sure all of your screws are out. Then you put a small little screwdriver in there and you pop the door trim panel off. And up by the door release handle, you'll see that there's a small Torx inside there. You'll need to remove that Torx before you can go any further. And by removing the Torx, you're just going to make sure you put everything back in the same location that you previously took it out of. So we'll just take this out. We'll pull off the outside cover that actually by the mirror itself. We're going to remove that cover, and then we're going to lift the door panel up and out. Now if it's stuck, don't force it. By tapping on the upper portion of it and pushing it in, you can see it pulls right out. And then down inside the door itself, we're going to release the cables that actually connect up to the handle to open and close the door. The electrical connectors, you just push the small little locking tab in and you can pull them out. Make sure you push the tab in nice and firmly. You don't want to actually pull the wiring out of the back of the switch itself. And now you see the release on the door handle right there. We're actually going to remove that so we can take the cable off of the release itself. Now at this point you're going to be removing the plastic covering on the inside of the door. Don't just rip it off. You're going to need to put that back on there because that's a sound insulator, and it also keeps any kind of moisture from getting into the passenger compartment itself. So make sure you don't rip it. You want to reuse it. As far as the speaker, you pull the screws out of it, pull the speaker out, and then you pop that little tab off, and you can take the speaker out of the way. And then you can pull that whole plastic piece off without destroying it for future use to put it back together. Now at this point you want to take the small little bolts that actually hold the window itself to the window regulator. They're 10 millimeter, so we're going to take out, there's probably two of them on your vehicle as well. So we're going to take both of those 10 millimeter screws out. Again, put them on the side someplace because you're going to need to reuse them at a later time. Okay, now you'll see I'm using some tape here to hold the window up and out of the way. You can use any kind of tape that you want. I usually use just regular masking tape. I don't like using the duct tape because duct tape is actually, it's a little bit overkill, and sometimes that glue from that is a little difficult to take off. So what we'll do is we'll wrap that tape around the inside to the outside so it holds the window in place, so that when we remove the regulator bolts, it doesn't just fall down the window. So we're just going to pull it up and secure it up and out of the way. Now at this point we're going to take out all of the bolts that hold the regulator assembly to the door, to the inside panel of the door. So we're going to remove all of them from the car, truck, and we'll loosen up that regulator so that we can actually access it to slide it out through one of the openings. So make sure you have all your bolts out before you try to pull it up and out of there. Now on the back of the motor itself, you can see this little tab right here. You'll push that tab in with your thumb, push it in, just rock it back and forth, and you unplug it right from the motor itself. If it doesn't pull out right away, don't worry about it. Just give it a little, like a screwdriver, and you can push in on that tab to get it to release. Now at this point you want to try to pull the window regulator down and slide it out through the opening in the door frame itself. And if you just close everything down and like squeeze it together, you'll be able to pull it right out. Okay, now we'll take our replacement window regulator and motor assembly and we just put it right back in the exact same way that we took it out. Just maneuver it around and put it right back up so that you actually can line up all of the bolts that you previously took out. So we're just going to play around with it now till we have everything lined up, and then we're going to catch all of the bolts. Now before you tighten up any of the bolts in here, you want to just make sure everything is caught first, and by caught I mean that the bolt screws into the motor and the regulator by at least a couple of threads. It's a lot easier to put the bolts in while everything is still loose versus tightening up one bolt and then the bolt holes may be slightly off just a little bit. So catch everything by hand, screw it in a couple of turns, and then once you have all of the bolts caught, or by a couple of threads at least, at that point is when you will go around and tighten everything up till it's snug. Now I never use anything but a 1/4 inch drive socket to do this because these bolts are very small, and if you over tighten them with a 3/8 ratchet, you run the possibility of maybe snapping off the bolts. So everything I do inside of the door is always done with a 1/4 inch ratchet set, so that way you don't have any chance of breaking anything off. Now we're going to go around and we're going to snug everything up. Now that we have everything that was caught, now we can tighten it all up so that everything is tightened up before we proceed to putting the window back into the new regulator. Okay, now that everything is tight, you want to make sure that you plug your motor back in because you'd hate to put your door back together only to find out that you forgot to plug your motor back in. So make sure when you plug it in, you hear that snap as the plug goes into the motor. And that snap is actually the plug locking in place so that it will not be a problem where it rattles out at some point when you go over a bump. We're going to remove the tape from the top of the window and lower it down. And now we'll catch the bolts that actually secure the window regulator assembly to the window itself. So now we're just, before we put the 2 bolts in, we're going to screw 1 bolt in with just a couple of threads, and then we'll maneuver the window around so that we could get the second one in. And after that's done, now we can tighten up the bolts on the window itself, and we're ready to put the door plastic covering back on. Now when you're putting your plastic shield or dust shield or sound insulator back on, most of the time it'll stay on where it came off because the glue on there is very sticky. But if you put it back in there and it doesn't hold properly, at that point you can take some kind of a masking tape or duct tape or any kind of tape that you want to put on there to hold it back in. Most of the time, like I said, it does stay on by itself because that glue is very, very sticky. So we're just going to push it now so that it actually adheres onto the door. Now we're going to take our speaker, and we're going to plug the plug back in that was actually on the speaker itself. We're going to put that back in, and then we'll secure the speaker back in place with the screws that we previously took out. And again, the same thing we did previously. You don't want to tighten up any of the screws on the speaker itself until you have all the screws or at least caught by a couple of threads. And once they're caught by a couple of threads, then we can go around and we can tighten up all of the screws that hold the speaker into the door itself. Now we're going to go in and we're going to put that armrest piece back on that we previously took off. Remember, we took that off because that piece that secures the armrest to it actually goes over the top of that plastic insulator that we put in there. So we're going to put it back on and screw it back in where it came back off, with making sure we use the same bolts that we're supposed to previously. We're going to reinstall the insulator in the bottom portion of the door. That's actually a sound insulator, and it's also probably something to do with impact too. I'm not sure exactly why, but we're going to put it back in, and that'll keep the door nice and firm, and it won't have that hollow feel underneath the door when you put it back together. So don't throw it away. Make sure you use the piece that you put. It's like a styrofoam piece that goes back inside the door, and then we'll put our tabs back in and lock it in place. Okay, now we'll grab our door panel and we'll bring our panel back over to where we actually are going to reattach it on there. Now, remember, the first thing we did is we want to reattach all of our electrical plugs. Again, you're going to listen for the plugs to snap into place. Once they snap in, then you know they're not going to actually fall out by accident. And then once you get that done, then we're going to take that cable that releases the door or unlocks the door and opens it, and we're going to put it back in where we previously took it out of. And then we'll make sure that that little tab snaps back into the door itself so that it actually is held in there nice and tight. Okay, now we're going to take our door panel and we're going to hang it from the top first. We're going to put the top on first, and then we'll push it down and snap it in place. And you want to make sure that the top piece goes around with the channel where the window runs. And now we'll grab all of our screws that we previously took out, and we're going to put them all in until we have them with no leftover screws at all. So we're going to catch everything by hand. Instead of screwing it in with the ratchet, we're going to screw it in by hand so we don't cross-thread anything. Not that it's a big problem because it's actually just screwing into plastic as well, so it's not really a big deal. But we're going to catch it and snug everything down nice and tight, and then we'll go around and we'll put all the screws in the frame of the door itself. Okay, now after everything is all tightened up, you turn the key to the on position, and if you've done your job correctly, your windows should go up and down without any kind of problems. Now obviously we are going to clean all of those greasy fingerprints off the window before the car goes back to the customer. As always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.